Good morning, everyone. For those that are starting to join us, welcome. This is Shannon from the Twin West Chamber. We're just going to give it a few minutes while our attendees join the call. I see the number ticking up in the participant line, so we're getting more and more attendees joining us. A few housekeeping rules for the day. You will see, as you hover your mouse, you will see the Q&A button down at the bottom of the screen. We use the Q&A feature to ask questions of our panelists. So if you want to submit your questions that way, we have a moderator today for the discussion, and so we'll be moderating those, or looking at those questions and moderating them as they come in. So we'll give it just a couple more minutes and then we can get started. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our July Issues and Insights. This is our monthly event that we have that we talk about some of the most critical issues affecting our region and our community, our businesses. So I want to welcome you today. My name is Shannon Full, the president of the Twin West Chamber. We're putting on this event jointly with the Minneapolis Chamber of Commerce. As many of you have seen, we've gotten, we're moving along very quickly and with a significant amount of due diligence around the consolidation of the Twin West Chamber with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. I welcome your thoughts as we continue to move forward with that. We've had about 9 visioning sessions so far around the creation of the new a large regional chamber of commerce and what that will mean for our members. So I encourage you to participate with us along the journey and help us shape the future of the Chamber of Commerce for us. So thank you again to the Minneapolis Chamber and their team for their partnership and participation on this. The agenda for the day, you can see we have a very packed agenda, so we're looking forward to a great conversation. We will first start, as always, with our legislator question of the day. And so that usually we have legislators now from the state level as well as from county commission and our mayors that are invited to join us with their perspectives on this particular question. We are thrilled to have Congressman Dean Phillips with us today, along with Ethan Hellier from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, as the Congressman is being given and accepting the Spirit of Enterprise Award, which is a very prestigious award that is given by the U.S. Chamber. So we welcome that. And then we'll have a very robust discussion around manufacturing. Manufacturing is a significant component to our economy. And so we are going to have the opportunity to hear from 3 business leaders in very different manufacturing segments talking to us about COVID and the effects of COVID. So as always, we can't do these events without significant support and sponsorship. And so we want to take a moment to welcome and thank our sponsors. These are sponsors that many of them have been with us for many years, as this is the premier program for the Twin West Chamber. So thanks again to all of these sponsors. Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures has been a sponsor with us for many, many years and still stays committed to the chamber, even though through this whole COVID piece, they're one of those industries that has had a significant negative impact. And so we appreciate the support, Mille Lacs, that Corporate Ventures. The rest of the sponsors that you see in the sustaining sponsorships, Abbott Northwest, Alina Health, Abbott Northwestern, Centerpoint Energy, PCS Human Capital Management, Rasmussen College, Rudy Luther Toyota, and Velocity Public Affairs. We also have numerous session sponsors that contribute to this as well. AAA Minneapolis, AT&T, CBiz, Choice Bank, Comcast, Scott Build, Goff Public, and Weber Johnson. Finally, we have a media sponsor that does some in-kind media promotion for us in finance and commerce. So Bill and the crew there, thank you so much. And our in-kind sponsor, Runway Analytics. All right, so we will jump right into the legislator, the elected official question of the day. We really wanted to ask your perspective specifically on business recovery. So if you could speak to us just a few moments each around what you believe as an elected official you could do to provide some stability and support for businesses as we look to recover through what many are saying are a double crisis in our region. So I am going to, for a moment, stop sharing my screen so that I can see all of our legislators, and I will call upon each legislator for their perspectives. So let me see. I'm just going to go right across my screen. That's probably the easiest to do. So don't take any offense to the way in which I call your name. So let's start first with Representative Kelly Morrison. Oh, you're muted, Kelly.
The classic Zoom, good morning. Please unmute yourself. Good morning, everyone, and thanks. I have many thoughts on this topic, but there are a lot of us, so I'll be brief. I have three things in mind. One, there will be no business recovery, no economic recovery if we don't manage the pandemic. And I think one of the best ways for us to keep business open and to keep business continuing to recover is for people to wear masks in indoor public spaces. And if we don't start doing a better job of that, I'm afraid we may need to require it of ourselves. I think managing the public health issue is probably the most important thing that we can do as we look at an economic recovery. Secondly, as we enter what is a recession, it's not the time to increase taxes on businesses, in my view. So that's another way that we can certainly support business in our recovery. And then lastly, I do think it's important that we have a robust bonding bill this year. That is a way to create jobs. We have many infrastructure needs across our state, and that can help stimulate our economy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative Morrison. Representative Patty Acom.
Thanks, and good morning. Happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation. My name is Patty Acom. I represent the cities of Minnetonka, Plymouth, and Woodland. And I will also take a second to congratulate Congressman Phillips on his award. I'm looking forward to seeing that later and the really interesting panel discussion that we have coming up. But I think your question about providing stability and recovery, I think I would have to echo a couple of the things that Representative Morrison has shared. And I think, you know, I'm proud of the fact that as a state, we've been able to provide some grants and forgivable loans and low interest loans to businesses to help them through this incredibly challenging time. And so I think that's a help in and of itself. And I think that in order for businesses to operate, they really need people to be healthy. And I do think the concept of wearing masks is really important in public, especially in indoor spaces. And while Minnesota is currently in a pretty good spot with as far as the pandemic, I think we've seen around the country how fragile that can be and how quickly that can change. And so I think taking precautions to keep each other and ourselves healthy is a really important step that we all need to consider. And so masks are important, as are the whole thing of social distancing and washing our hands. And so I think the personal safety is an important aspect. So I think there's lots to hear from, so I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Representative Kristen Robbins.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, I'll echo what my colleagues have said about continuing to manage the public health aspects of this. I think we're doing great. Our numbers continue to be good, even though much of our economy has reopened. And so I'm really encouraged by that, and I hope that that continues. The issues I just wanted to highlight quickly are we did pass at the legislature a small business grant program, which I have been a champion of, and I would like to see, depending on how the COVID funds are used, to continue to think about adding more money to that program. That's a priority for me if there are COVID funds available for that. And secondly, I really think it's important, if possible, in one of these special sessions to get full Section 179 conformity done. I think that that would really help drive investment that is needed to propel this economy. And so I'm a fierce advocate for that. And then thirdly, I also agree, you know, we are facing a huge budget deficit in the state, and I would not support increasing taxes to figure that out. There are ways we can look to cut spending, and I will certainly be doing that over the interim. And finally, I really have been a strong advocate, reaching out to the governor on many fronts to take a regional approach. There are 87 counties in the state. At this point, only 12 have more than 500 cases. We do not need more statewide mandates where you're not really accounting for the local impact of the virus. So I really am encouraging all of us to encourage the governor to take a regional approach, not a statewide mandate, because they're shutting down in previous orders sections of the economy where there were no cases. And so I think for the health of the state recovery, we need to be much more targeted than we have been in the past.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Ann Rest. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Senator.
I had moved my my mouse, so I wasn't so it wasn't in the right place to do that. Well, thank you for this question. On the issue, I have several responses, but I think it's extremely important that members of the public, as consumers, make their influence felt by businesses. Case in point, I belong or go to a studio for strength training. And when they opened, I changed from virtual to in-person workouts. And the first time I went in, it's usually half men, half women that are there at the same time. And at least 3 of the people that were there were not wearing masks. And so I told the person that I was training with, and I've been going there for 15 years, if everybody in here is not wearing a mask, I'm not coming back. Well, lo and behold, that afternoon, everyone got an email saying that mandatory masking was going to take place from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and you weren't to come in if you were not masked. And so the next appointment I had, I was masked. Everybody else in there was masked. And not to make a sexist point, but every person there, other than the trainers, were women. Now, I think that speaks to the intelligence and of us females, but it means that I wasn't the only one that made that complaint, and the business responded, and you can hardly now get an appointment other than, or at least I have to go way far out to make sure I get my regular appointments in the mandatory masking period. So customers, members of the public can have an influence. It's not just government that can make something the law. It truly is personal responsibility. And I think that we cannot underestimate the power of customers, members of the public, every place where people are going to be in public, where they, if some reckless person decides not to wear a mask, if it's not mandatory. I do think that we have benefited from the gradual reopening, and that every point we are taking stock of the decisions that are being made, and that we should be grateful for that as we look at, again, the reckless, in my opinion, the reckless reopenings too fast, too soon in other states. I think that that shows that our restraint is worth it, and that we have benefited from that. I also think that it's important that members of the public are informed by legislators, by the governor, and by businesses themselves of best practices with regard to safety when we're out in public. And secondly, or lastly, about the budget, there is no way in this world that we can cut $2 billion in spending unless we are not going to take care of the sick, of the elderly, and of our school children. We're going to have a balanced approach. It's going to include lots of things, not all of which every single person or business is going to endorse. We're all in this, as the sign says. We're all in this together, and no one group of constituents or businesses or industry sectors, I believe, is going to be able to return to the old normal. That's just not going to happen. And the sooner that we recognize that we're going to have to make some hard choices, I think the better off we'll be. Thankfully, that won't happen until next January, but we need to be prepared for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Kristen Bonner.
Can you hear me? All right, make sure I'm unmuted. Well, good morning. Thank you. I'm State Representative Kristen Bonner from Maple Grove and Osseo. And I guess I looked at this question and sort of looking at sort of obviously we understand the budget challenges that we're under, but so, the first and foremost, obviously the one thing that costs us nothing, and I think businesses are exceptionally good at this in evolving, is understanding ways to make sure that we keep our businesses open, that we keep folks at their jobs, and that we can keep the economy moving forward. And a lot of that is something that we can do in terms of personal responsibility as businesses and as citizens. And so I echo a little bit of my colleague, Representative Morrison, and some of my others in saying, when we know that keeping our favorite shop open and in business, as they have for the last 20 or 30 years, means that we wear a mask for a few minutes, I think that's a small price to pay in order to make sure that we still have that corner ice cream shop or the little boutique or all of those kinds of businesses. Because quite frankly, I think our businesses have suffered enough, and I don't think that many of them would be able to survive a backslide. So as they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I truly believe that, and I know Dr. Morrison in particular believes that. So that's $0. In terms of how we can do this in putting our money where our mouth is, literally, obviously, I would like to see a robust bonding bill. I think that it's really important to have those investments and bringing those jobs into the economy, bolstering local businesses and vendors. And I think that includes robust spending in terms of transportation and housing. It's certainly also important that we make sure we get folks where they need to be and get those jobs up and ready. I think emphasis on projects that are ready to go. So we're feeding our economy and bolstering that. And the last piece is really, I agree with Representative Robbins in that we have been able to put some programs out there in terms of helping provide aid specifically targeted at small businesses and micro businesses who've really been struggling. If we can, I would love to see us do more in that avenue as well and provide that additional support for them to make it through these really tough times. But I will just lastly say briefly that I'm really heartened in that I've seen some really incredible things, particularly from our small to mid-sized businesses in terms of the innovations that they've been employing to not only keep their doors open, keep their employees at work, but really to kind of build and expand and grow their business. I know we have a local business on Main Street in Osseo that had kind of kicked around the idea of doing a lot more work online for quite some time. These two ladies have a lovely little boutique, and this kind of gave them the impetus to do that. And they've seen some incredible opportunities and some incredible growth from doing that they think will sustain them long beyond the pandemic. So I do believe our small businesses are really great innovators, and I'm looking forward to seeing what more we see in the future from them as well.
Great, thank you, Representative. Representative Mike Freiberg.
Hi, thank you for hosting this meeting. I agree with what many of my colleagues have said, particularly about the importance of wearing masks to help with the recovery from the pandemic itself. I don't think we'll truly have an economic recovery until we've gotten through the pandemic. I did, just to respond to the question that was asked, I do want to mention one thing that I feel like as a legislator I am able to do, and that's just provide kind of one-on-one assistance, particularly with businesses and individuals who are dealing with, who are having trouble accessing some sort of benefit from the state or contacting an official at a state agency. As legislators, we're able to help streamline, just to help people get in touch. Well, we know people at each agency. We can usually get through to somebody when they're not able to. So, a big part of what I've been doing and what I know many of my colleagues have also been doing is just fielding questions from businesses in our districts, from constituents who work for businesses that live in our district, who are just experiencing some issues accessing, whether it's like, from a benefit from the COVID relief fund or just trying to work through some sort of regulation or executive order. We are uniquely positioned to be able to kind of cut through the clutter and get to somebody and get their issues resolved. And in the first month or two of the pandemic, it seemed like that I was spending hours and hours doing that each day. It doesn't always generate the amount of attention that like working on a bill or speaking on the floor of the legislature does, but it's a very important part of our job. So, I just wanted to mention that we're able to do that and, agree with my colleagues also, but don't need to repeat everything they said.
Great, thank you for that. Senator Paul Anderson.
Well, thanks, Shannon, and grateful for Twin West leadership through these challenging times. Congrats as well to Congressman Phillips on his award and good work in Washington. Sure appreciate all the PPP work, and we got more to do. Priority for me, really listen during these unprecedented times. There are real needs for our small businesses and our manufacturers to survive. So being flexible, being nimble, words usually not known for government, and then act in a bipartisan way to move and help our small businesses. This is something that we work hard. Representative Robbins mentioned on the Small Business Emergency Relief Grants, worked with Representative Stevenson in the House and Commissioner Grove to provide assistance. And we know small businesses and our manufacturers are the backbone of our economy. We just really need to be there for them now and help them recover. These are serious, serious challenges. You got the financial impact, you got the change in operations, you got disruptions to supply chain in so many ways, so many different challenges. It's hard enough to be a small business owner. It's hard enough to be a manufacturer. And so as we come alongside and we work through these challenges, work together, work with organizations like Twin West, work with our associations, work directly with our manufacturers and small business owners. And again, lawmakers must listen. We don't have all the answers. I know that's shocking to hear, and we need to respond in real time so we can rebound as fast as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. And we only have one local representative, but Mayor Jeff Washy, can you give us some perspective as from the local city level as well?
Yeah, and first, I'd also add congratulations to Congressman Phillips on his award. I think it's well deserved. He's worked hard for us in Washington, and so just want to reach out and say congratulations to you, Congressman Phillips. And I also want to say I appreciate Senator Anderson's T-shirt, "Shop, Support Local." That's a theme we've been emphasizing here in Plymouth, is to support our local restaurants. They've been having hard, and so I'll just talk about that for a little bit. As I've talked to some of our restaurant owners, people are comfortable in Plymouth, at least, dining outside. So if you go on the outside patios, you'll see those used fairly well, but people are still not really going inside to dine. And so you go in there and there might be a couple of tables that are full, or have people in them. But we don't see people still getting comfortable to dine inside at this point in time. Aside from the retail piece of it, Plymouth's #1 industry is manufacturing. And so my #1 priority is just staying in communication with companies out there, just to keep my pulse on what's going on. And there's just a wide variety of what's going on with this. We're seeing supply chains change, where companies are going more local. They may even gone, previously used vendors across the border or internationally. They're moving not just to domestic, they're also looking at taking supply chains that are on the coast or not necessarily close and getting even closer. So Minnesota companies are usually really starting to utilize other Minnesota companies for their supply chain. So we see manufacturers that their business is actually growing 20, 30, even 40%. And then we see companies that are furloughing employees in manufacturing. So I talked with a company earlier this week in the med tech, med device, because elective surgeries were eliminated. It took them to about May, but all of a sudden they felt their orders going down because, the Abbotts, the Medtronics who are supplying those products, they didn't have a need or a demand for it because they couldn't use that for that knee replacement or that hip replacement or whatever that elective surgery might have been. And so those orders went down, and it's kind of a delayed response to this pandemic of how it's hitting the supply chain. So it's really impactful with manufacturing, how the whole supply chain movement, either plus or minus, is impacting them. The one thing we really focus on from a city perspective is to make sure we're keeping our businesses informed of the changing directives and resources that are out there. They can't keep track of that, so the more we can stay in communication, keep them informed of what's going on, the better that they know resources that are available or how to react with their businesses. So that's what's going on in Plymouth.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. To all of you elected officials, thank you so much for your service and your engagement with us. The one thing that we're finding is that it is critical to keep those open lines of communication with our business community, and we are seeing a time like we've never seen, that this is so broad and widespread with our businesses. We're very concerned around how we help continue to support them. So please use us as a resource, continue to engage with us. I purposely didn't call on Congressman Phillips because he's going to have some opportunity, some time right now to talk a little bit about his comments from the federal level. So I will introduce Ethan Hellier right now from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who will present the award on behalf of the U.S. Chamber. So Ethan, you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Shannon, and thanks for letting me steal a few minutes of the program this morning. Always appreciate the partnership at Twin West and everything that you guys do for businesses in the West Metro. So just want to thank you from the start. As most of you probably know, the U.S. Chamber is the world's largest business association. We represent about 3 million across the nation, and this is including local, regional, and state chambers of commerce. Every year we release a scorecard where we grade members' votes. And then based on that tabulation is how you qualify for our Spirit of Enterprise Award. However, in 2020, where everything's changed, we've also changed the way that we grade our members as well. We're now giving them credit for working across the aisle. It doesn't necessarily have to be a business issue or a priority of the U.S. Chamber, but if you're willing to work across the aisle, we want to give you credit for that. And Congressman Phillips, at least according to our calculations and tabulations, he's one of the best in his caucus of doing that. Also, we want to give them credit if they're willing to sponsor or co-sponsor bills that we're in favor of. So another really good example for that is Congressman Phillips was a sponsor to get rid of the Cadillac tax. If think back to the Affordable Care Act when that was passed, seems like eons ago, but there was a large excise tax in that called the Cadillac tax. He was on a bill to get rid of that, and it actually happened. So it's something that he was a sponsor on. It made it all the way through Congress, passed, signed into law. We no longer have that tax. So I want to give him credit for that as well. Now, normally this is the time of the program where I'd shake his hand. I would, put down my, Penny's coffee, and I would grab the trophy and I would, hand it to him. But, as the whole new virtual world that we're living in, really the best I can do is just thank him for being a friend of business and a champion of free enterprise. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Ethan. In high school, I didn't get great grades and I never got trophies. So this is awfully special for me. Thank you very, very much, Ethan, and to the U.S. Chamber, to you, Shannon, and Twin West, and to Jonathan and the Minneapolis Regional, and to all of you. Thanks for taking the time this morning to spend a few minutes together, to my fellow elected officials for your comments. And as a small business owner and someone who spent his entire life in this community, I'm very honored to accept with great enthusiasm the Spirit of Enterprise Award. And as fate would have it, just last night I was going through some old boxes in my home, and I found that 58 years ago to almost the day, my great-grandfather, Jay Phillips' term as the president of the Minneapolis Chamber came to an end, and this was the magazine that celebrated him almost 58 years to the day. So a special honor to be saluted by the Chamber and by all of you. So as I reflect on the award and on my first term in Congress, which I think many would argue is one of the more colorful first terms members of Congress have ever had, I really think about three objectives that I wish to achieve if I can even leave the tiniest legacy as a member of Congress. And the first is to inspire innovation. It's the lifeblood of American business, and it has got to be the same for our government. We are still an 18th century institution trying to solve 21st century problems. And our founders intentionally designed a system to make change really difficult. And it works exceedingly well. And we're in the midst of a technological revolution, but you would never know it if you walked around Congress. We passed legislation that has injected trillions of dollars into our economy to keep it afloat, which, by the way, is the largest distribution of taxpayer dollars in human history. Yet, I was handed a pager on my first day of service in Congress, and we had to develop a remote working infrastructure from scratch, if you can imagine that, during the pandemic. And we still have countless members, I won't name them, but we have countless members that still do not know how to log on to Zoom and constantly have to unmute their microphones with prompting. So we've got to redesign Congress. The physical, social, and organizational deficiencies are clear. Any of you that operate businesses in any capacity would recognize it quickly. And I hope over time we can send more people with that kind of experience to join me. The second objective of mine is to increase collaboration. And Ethan just spoke to that and how the Chamber has changed its system. And I really celebrate that, because it doesn't matter which party might be in the majority or minority. If we don't collectively inspire and reward people for doing well together, we're going to be in big trouble. And we can talk more about that later perhaps as well. But I'm proud that I'm the 27th most bipartisan member of Congress out of 435 total members. The Enterprise Award is the second award I received this year from the Chamber. Earlier this summer, I received the Jefferson Hamilton Award for bipartisanship. And I mention this because collaboration, innovation, and enterprise are fundamentally linked. It's a view shared by the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is the first caucus I joined in Congress. We are 25 Democrats and 25 Republicans. And our members share a somewhat controversial belief that if we work together and build trust with civility, that we can get things done. And we are. And it's an untold story. I wish more were aware of it. And my hope is that over time we can inspire more people to join our caucus. And we've also been essential working with the White House to pass aid for workers, help get us through the shutdown, and particularly helping small businesses during the pandemic. We cast aside our petty differences, focus on common ground, and frankly, do what all of you do running your businesses. We ideate, we innovate, we build trust, and we get things done. And the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act, which some of you are probably aware I worked hard on and got passed last month, is a great example of that. I was listening to so many in our community, small business owners, tell me how the Paycheck Protection Program was not working well for them. I was back in Washington, crossed paths with my friend Chip Roy from Texas, one of the more conservative members of the Republican conference. And he told me he was hearing the exact same things 1,200 miles away in Texas. And that's how Congress should work. But it starts with intentional relationships. He and I have one, despite some differences of opinion in politics and ideologies. But we worked together and we got it done. And it's a great example of how people with different perspectives, if you listen and share a cup of coffee on occasion, you can do good things. And we got to inspire a whole lot more of that. And the bill that we put together, the Paycheck Protection Flexibility Act, which significantly improved the program, passed 417-1 in the House of Representatives, which means I'm gonna have to work a little harder next time to get that one vote from my colleague who we still, no matter what we did, we could not get Thomas Massey from Kentucky to come along with us, but we got it done. So restaurants and flower shops and hair salons in Wayzata, Plymouth, Brooklyn Park, you name it, all the way to San Antonio, Texas, all benefited from that. And that's how Congress really, really should work. And I'm proud of that. But we've got a lot of work ahead. We've got to provide federal aid to our states and municipalities. The mayor just spoke from Plymouth. I look very carefully at budget impact to all of the municipalities in our district. And it's traumatic. And if we do not do something soon, come together as Democrats and Republicans, I'm afraid we are going to see significant cuts in service, both at the state and local levels. And that's going to impact every single one of the businesses that all of us operate. And that is a responsibility of all of us in Congress to get done soon. And ensure that as we emerge from this crisis, that we are well prepared to rebuild this economy and recognize, I should say as well, that we're not ever going to go back to an old normal. It's incumbent on all of us on this call to build a new normal. There's going to be a lot of trauma. Businesses are going to close. Many already have, hundreds of thousands, but it's also going to create new opportunities. And I want to ensure that we can find the capital flows to startups, to entrepreneurs that have dreams, that they're surrounded with mentorship and support, so that we can create a 21st century economy that may present an opportunity rather than just a trauma to all of us. And that is one of my hopes. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, my objective is to inject a dose of optimism, both into Congress and into our country. It's a very cynical world, and the bravest thing that we can all do is hope. And I know that many of you, like me, are discouraged when you wake up and read the news, if you watch Fox News or MSNBC, or God forbid, spend your time on Twitter. It's clear we're facing unprecedented challenges, and many, too many, are living in fear. And pessimism and cynicism are pervasive in both parties. And it's really easy to conclude that change isn't going to be possible, but it is. And I remind you that the United States was built on the same foundation of entrepreneurship that many of you bring to your businesses every single day. We're a country of immigrants that dare to dream for a better life. We saved the free world in World War I and World War II. We're a nation of ideators and innovators and inventors, and most importantly, problem solvers. So this is our time. And like the greatest generation before us, we're duty bound. And I mean it sincerely, we are duty bound to rise to this occasion and serve our fellow Americans. And I think it starts with all of us. So I really want to thank you, a heartfelt thank you to you, Ethan, to the Chamber, Shannon, Jonathan, and all of you for believing in all of us, for giving me this chance to represent us and try to bring people together. These are kindergarten lessons, I should remind all of you, kindergarten lessons that we have forgotten in many cases. You know, how to listen to one another, how to respect one another, and how to treat each other with compassion and celebrate differences, not demean them. So in that spirit, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all of you, wish you Godspeed, and remind you that optimism is just as contagious as fear. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Congressman. Again, a sincere congratulations from all of us, and we so appreciate the partnership that we have with you. You and your team, your staff is absolutely tremendous, and we appreciate that. So, okay, moving on. We are going to jump into the program, and so we're going to start with Steve Kalina is our moderator for the day. He's the president and CEO of the Minnesota Precision Manufacturing Association. Steve has also been a great partner and friend. We're doing a lot more collaboration with our trade associations, and so this is a great opportunity for us to come together on this program. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve. I'll operate the PowerPoint behind the scenes here, Steve. And again, as a reminder, if any of you attendees have questions, use that Q&A bar at the very bottom of your screen. Just type in your question and we'll get to Q&A after the presentation. Take it away, Steve.
All right, thank you, Shannon. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this great discussion. Again, as Shannon mentioned, I'm the president and CEO of the Minnesota Precision Manufacturing Association, or MPMA. So we're a trade association of hundreds of manufacturers around the state that work together on workforce development, education, and policy. So of course, we all hear about COVID-19 every day, whether from the president, Dr. Fauci, Governor Walz, the Department of Health. But there's only so much our state and federal government agencies, and of course our representatives and senators as well, can do to direct business. You know, they aren't in our facilities every day and aren't able to give us every answer we need to every problem we face. So hearing from our peers can be very valuable, especially because each of us are trying to figure out solutions to everyday specific challenges to our businesses. So today we've got three industry leaders from great local companies that are going to share some insights, successes, and challenges they've faced over the past few months. So again, as Shannon mentioned during the presentations, feel free to submit questions using the question and answer function, and we'll answer them after the presentations. So today we're going to hear from three people: Greg Tice, the Vice President at Liberty Diversified International; Lee Anderson, the Director of Global Issues Management and Public Affairs at General Mills; and first, we're going to hear from Kevin Hogan, the CEO of Diversified Plastics. So Kevin has about 3.5 decades of experience with a strong track record of growth, profitability, strategic partnerships, and acquisitions. Prior to Diversified, Kevin was with Vuelta Management out of St. Paul, and he also served as president at Stylemark, a leading manufacturer of architectural products in Fridley. Additionally, he has held executive positions at Jostens, Pillsbury, and Select Comfort. Kevin?
All right, well, thank you, Steve, and good morning. And appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm always honored to share the Diversified Plastics story. And so what I have for you today is just a little bit of overview on the company to lay the groundwork so you understand who we are and what we do. And then we'll talk about the year that we're in kind of three chapters, because they're three, I think, very different chapters, if you will. So first of all, Diversified Plastics. We're based in Brooklyn Park. We're a custom injection molder, which means we produce plastic parts and components that go into products that go into municipal water filtration, medical device, and assorted other important industries. We're 43 years in business, and a year and a half ago, we actually acquired another similarly structured company in California. So we have two facilities, about 110 employees, so we're definitely in that small manufacturer category. And a couple things to note about the company is that in 2011, it was converted into a 100% ESOP. So Jim Dow, the founder, created the ESOP, and the employee owners are now the owners of Diversified Plastics and have been for a number of years. And that's an important factor for us, and we like to promote that. The other thing to note before we jump into the COVID situation is that we've experienced some rapid growth over the past 3 years. From 2017 to our fiscal 2019, we grew our revenue 50%. It was a combination of the acquisition I referenced, our strong organic growth, and other key investments we've made in the business, including some very interesting additive manufacturing technology. So we've been on a strong growth rate as we entered fiscal 2020. And as I share our COVID experience, I just wanted to highlight our fiscal year starts in November and goes through October. So we have three, I think, very distinct segments that we're experiencing this year. And I won't spend a whole lot of time on the pre-COVID era because that was normal business activities. And I'll focus most of my comments towards our March-June period. And now as we're into July, and as I've termed it, our COVID emergence, we'll talk about that. And by the way, if there's a nugget or two that come out of this from our experience at Diversified, that'd be great. And I'm also looking forward to hearing from Lee and Greg and seeing how our experience compares with them. So when we talk about the COVID experience, for us it really started on March 17th. And even though we had put some initial protocols in place prior to that of hand washing and social distancing, on March 17th, we realized that we had to dramatically change our focus given the on-spread of COVID. And from that point on through up till today, our focus became twofold. Number one, how do we maintain employee safety? And number two, business continuity. And obviously everybody who runs a business know that they go hand in hand. And what that created was very much a focus on day-to-day, week-to-week activities to make sure we're taking the right steps to achieve both those objectives. So in the area of employee safety, I won't go into a lot of detail that are encompassed by other companies who've done similar things. But with our situation, we were operating during the entire shelter-in-place period. By virtue of the customers and industries that we serve, we were deemed an essential business. And the benefit that provided is that our employees did not have to worry about furloughs or layoffs or unemployment, but there was a level of anxiety in that the people who had to come into the building each day, how do we protect those? So we did a number of things. We mobilized as much of our workforce as we could to go remote. We staggered manufacturing shift as best we could with either direct manufacturing or the ancillary functions that are around there. We staggered our people who did have to come into the office so that we could minimize the amount of people coming into the building. And we started doing more virtual meetings as everybody did during that time period. We also implemented and continue to implement advanced protocols. And we started with hand washing and social distancing, and we've continued to revisit those and revamp those during that time period. And it's important to know that we've actually experienced some test positive employees. We've two in our Minnesota facility. The second one actually earlier this week was confirmed test positive, and one in our California facility. And by the way, we've kept in close contact with our California facility during this time period to make sure that we were supporting each facility, learning from their experience and vice versa, and where we could support each facility, we did that. So I think we've, again, I don't know if we've done anything unique from other companies who've been in this situation, but we certainly have done reacted very quickly during this time period. So I said our two goals in the COVID area were employee safety and business continuity. So if I talk about a business continuity, I could take an hour, but I won't. But we have experienced dramatic negative impact and dramatic positive impact in terms of revenue from our customers. Our top three customers all were negatively impacted during the COVID era. And probably the most significant, and this ties to a comment one of the legislatures made, we have a large medical device company who represents significant revenue to us. And we never really thought that they would ever go to zero in terms of orders in our order backlog. But they are tied to elective surgeries. And when elective surgeries were ground to zero with COVID, this company declared force majeure and their order backlog went to zero. Something, again, we would have never expected. Another major customer tied to the medical community provides products, and we provide components to those products into the dental clinic and medical clinic segment. And they've also ground to a halt. In fact, that customer has experienced extended plant shutdowns as a result of their business being ground to a very, very low level. So we've had some extremely negative impacts on our revenue, but we've also had some positive impacts. And I guess the area that I'm most proud about with the Diversified team is that when COVID was really raging in March, we leaned in and we said, what can we do as a company with our capabilities to support the COVID fight? And there's a number of things that we did. I'm just going to highlight two of those for this group. We're leveraging both our injection molding and our new additive manufacturing technology. On the injection molding side, we saw the most direct way we could participate in the COVID fight is through face shields. And many people in various forms were jumping in to provide health care providers with face shields. We connected with a partner who had large quantities of the clear shields themselves, but they needed a partner to build or produce the plastic halo that would hold the face shield. And literally within a matter of a few days, we worked with them on a design, finalized that, and then we went into tooling. And for those of you who don't know anything about injection molding, you need a large metal tool in order to produce product. And that tool typically takes weeks to produce. And clearly we were trying to move quickly. And I challenged our in-house tooling team to say, you have a week to build this tool. We gave them the project on a Thursday, and I had an email on Saturday afternoon that the tool was done. So in a little over 50 hours, they created a tool. And that next week, we were producing tens of thousands of halos that then went into face shields. And we've now produced hundreds of thousands of those halos. So it's a testimony to the Diversified team in terms of leading in and joining the fight. The other example that we joined the fight was with our additive manufacturing technology. And additive manufacturing is 3D printing, but on steroids, in that we're able to scale and produce fairly large quantities of product. But we don't need a tool, and we can react extremely quickly. We have a partner in that technology called Carton. One Friday in late March, they reached out to us and said, we have a med device customer who's working with a hospital in New York City, and the hospital's asking them to create a ventilator splitter so that the hospital in New York could work with one ventilator could support two patients. And the long story made short, within 14 days, across 6 design iterations, we had provided a ventilator splitter that was being used in a hospital in New York City during the peak of the ventilator crisis out there. So that's an example of how our team really responded in the COVID era. And with that and all the other activities of leaning in, revenue were sustained in April and May, partly because of those activities. The other positive that we've experienced revenue-wise is participating with a new customer who provides products in the area of blood oxygen levels, pulse oximeters. And that their business has actually gone through the roof, and we have continually increased our capacity and we're starting to reconfigure our facility in order to support that. So I think it's an example of how we have moved quickly, both to react to the negative impacts of COVID and also the potential opportunities, if that's the right term, in this era to make sure that we could support people who needed those products that are out there. I guess the other thing I'll say in the COVID era is that Diversified, we did not participate in the PPP program. And we felt that we could get through that without the needs for those particular funds. And as I wrap up my time here, because I know we're short here, in the emergence era of COVID, what we're doing is instead of just keeping our heads down on these day-to-day, week-to-week issues, we're starting to lift our heads above our desk and look to the future. So we're starting to take the perspective of we have to focus on what we can control, not worry about what we can't control, and get back to longer-term planning, bring in the impact of COVID into our longer-term planning, but start developing new and different ways that we're going to grow our business that we weren't thinking of prior to COVID. So anyway, I know our time is short, and I'll leave it at that, Steve.
All right, well, thanks for your insights, Kevin. You've got some special circumstances that I'm sure have some good questions for. So we'll keep it moving, and we'll make sure we have some time for Q&A here. But next, we're going to ask Lee Anderson to speak. He's the Director of Global Issues Management and Public Affairs at General Mills. Lee leads the company response to public and regulatory issues, as well as government relations for the company. He's a member of the company's COVID-19 task force, and Lee is also actively engaged in several amazing organizations that coordinate food manufacturers, legislators, retailers, and the restaurant and food service sector to share best practices and drive more food rescue to those in need and combat hunger. So Lee?
Great, thanks, Steve. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Great, just want to confirm. So I'll run through a few points quickly. Most of you hopefully are familiar with General Mills, but obviously we're a food company based in Golden Valley, one of the world's largest. And you can see we're known by our brands, which you can see several of at the bottom of the slide here. You know, at General Mills, our purpose is making food the world loves. And what we saw in desperate relief during this time of COVID is that we're essentially making food the world needs. And that has driven two really big responses on our part that I'll talk about briefly. One is how we're making our food and delivering it to consumers that were at home and as such needed our products in record demand. And the second is helping to serve those people that couldn't afford our products and are having trouble accessing food. And as a food company, we take our responsibility very seriously to help serve the world in that way as well. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we've been supporting food relief during this time as well. But coming to how we're producing our food, our top priority through COVID-19 has been employee and food safety. The first thing, in case anybody hasn't heard it or needs a reminder, is that no World Health Organization or health organizations across the world have found any connection between COVID-19 and transmission in food. So we feel very safe about the food that we're providing, and obviously always hold our food production standards at the highest level. But what we really needed to ensure was the safety of our employees and of those in our value chain as well. We've been dealing with this really since December because we are a global food company. We have employees and significant operations in China. We've had a COVID task force since then. And as such, that really gave us a lot of early learnings about COVID and the pandemic as it was beginning to come to the US. And that really shaped a lot of our response. So I think that's a really important point, is that for those of us that operate globally, we can share those learnings as well. Based on that, we instituted safety measures very early on. We were probably one of the first food companies to implement a number of measures because of that. And it has really maintained our response as a result. And to date, all of our manufacturing and distribution facilities around the world have continued to operate without significant disruption. Yes, we have had COVID cases, but all of those have been in line with the communities around them, or in most cases, significantly better. So we have not had any disruptions to our facilities and our productions. You can see that some of the measures that we've implemented at our facilities and have had good success with that. That includes our production facilities in Minnesota, in Chanhassen and in Fridley. They have continued to operate. And one of the ways that we've done that is by providing enhanced benefits for our plant employees during the early periods and as we're continuing to transition to a more normal operating procedure. And then the last point that I'll make is we have significantly stepped up our already strong focus on providing food to people who need it. And as you can see, we have a significant focus. Those are just some of our annual numbers, but we've added some really amazing programs just during this time of COVID. So we did an additional $5 million grant just focused on programs in areas where children in particular have trouble accessing meals because of school closures and other disruptions from COVID. We also instituted a Manufacture to Donate program, and this actually was at our Chanhassen facility, which is primarily a production facility for the restaurant sector. And because of their immediate downturn when COVID came on board, they had capacity. And we made the decision to continue to run, and those products that they were making, we would donate those products specifically. We've supported restaurant employee funds. As I just mentioned, we have a significant restaurant business as well. And so we want to support those small restaurants. We've paid employees that had more time on their hands as a result of different shifts in their work schedule to actually go serve in their community with hunger relief nonprofits. But the number one thing for us is we have kept working, and our demand has remained high, as you can imagine, as a food company. And we've even had to go out and ask some of our office and non-production employees, can you help at some of our facilities? And we've had to, open our doors a little bit, and we still have openings. So check out generalmills.com/careers because we're still hiring. So it's been a really dynamic time for us, and I'm happy to pause there and answer questions when we open up the Q&A.
All right, well, thanks, Lee. I guess we'll move right along to Greg Theis, the Vice President at Liberty Packaging, a subsidiary of Liberty Diversified International. Greg has overall P&L responsibility for the company's corrugated manufacturing facilities in Minnesota, Illinois, and Nebraska. Throughout his career, Greg has held executive positions in sales and operations with responsibility for overall P&L. With more than 20 years of experience in the display and packaging industry, Greg joined LDI from Menasha Packaging Company in Neenah, Wisconsin, where he was the Vice President of Sales and Operations. Welcome, Greg.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I know that time is short, and we'll try to keep it moving this morning. So as Steve mentioned, I represent Liberty Packaging, and we operate 3 manufacturing locations in Minnesota, in Golden Valley, Brooklyn Park, and Becker, Minnesota. And Kevin touched on a number of these, and so I'll keep it moving. But I think for us, it was initially when we were impacted in March around COVID, we ultimately said, hey, we have to focus on our employees, our customers, and ultimately manage our business in a different way, and make sure that we keep this moving and not with the unknown future. And so for us, it was really about daily executive crisis meetings and having to communicate on different platforms, leveraging all of our networks as an executive team to ensure that we were understanding what was happening in the business and take best practices that were out in the marketplace and try to employ them in our business. And then ultimately, as Kevin mentioned as well, was truly a critical analysis of the business on a daily basis to understand how are we being impacted, how are our customers being impacted, and ultimately how are our employees being impacted. And so we took a number of immediate actions, and I think these are pretty common to a lot of the business leaders that are out there, but it was really focused on reduction of risk initially, which did the same thing as Kevin mentioned, work from home, distancing, enhanced cleaning practices, but and then also kind of shoring up our supply chain to ensure that we had consistent supply going forward. And then I think for us as leaders in the business, it was really about one of the key components of our action items were really about supporting and educating our employees, right? So they look to us as leaders in the business to ensure that we can help them navigate this both professionally and personally. And so for us, it was an evaluation of all of our policies. We enhanced our sick leave programs and gave all of our employees 10 additional days that they could use between now and the end of the year to be able to navigate, whatever that may bring them as we go forward. We increased our emergency fund so that our employees have an opportunity to be able to, to work with their current situations or whatever they may experience at home. And then it was, and Kevin touched on this as well, which was really focused on supporting our critical and changing customer demand. And as a packaging manufacturer, we support hundreds of manufacturers in Minnesota alone and thousands in the US. And that was really truly a dynamic change in terms of we had non-essential customers that really shut down. And so we had to work with them to understand their positions and to support them. And then at the same time, we had a lot of changing demands on the food side or medical side or e-commerce that really had spikes in at least some of their business, if not all of their business. And it was really an opportunity for us to really support them in any number of different, different manners, right? And so for us, we had an initial downturn in our business. I think as most did, we've seen that begin to turn around and actually very optimistic about where we're going from a business perspective. And then it was, kind of lastly in this, but it was really about managing the business day to day, right? Ensuring that we were being prudent in how we manage our business, both in travel and inventory, hiring practices, any capital expenditures that we had planned, obviously we had to evaluate those closely to understand, or at least try to understand, kind of this future, or the unknown future that we have in front of us. And then I think for us, right, and this is where we're at today, and Kevin touched on this, which is where do we go forward? And for us, it's really about innovation and being continuously, improving in our business. And so, we are truly dedicated to the safety of our employees. And so, some of the more innovative things I think that we've done, and we employ 700 plus people in Minnesota. And that was really about employing self-serve temperature testing stations. And so we've, in all of our sites, put thermal imaging so that employees can take their temperature as they enter the building, and that gives them a level of confidence that not only they are okay, but obviously their fellow employees are okay. We've implemented, actually this week, a mask policy, and so as you enter or exit our building, you will be wearing masks. And it is a change. It's a shift in how we have to look at it, and we need to educate our employees on that. And we do operate a number of our manufacturing sites in hot environments, and so how we manage with them, how we choose the type of PPE that we're going to employ is very important for us, and obviously most important for our employees. And then it got into creating value, and I think we do a great job of creating value for our customers, and that's always going to be paramount to who we are. I think the thing that we've done better than most, at least in my opinion, is take that value proposition that we employ and putting it in a virtual format, right? So we just don't have the ability to be in person with our customers as much as we had been. And so it's imperative for us to be able to give them information that is of value to them, that shows the value we would provide to them as a customer, and ultimately have that information flow through their facility and through their company without us being there to represent it. And so that was really a push for our organization, and ultimately a next level of engagement with our sales teams to be able to execute against that. And I said we had an initial dip in our business in March, and in June we were actually up a couple of points year over year in June as a result of being able to navigate with customers and do business and garner new business during this time. And so to me, that's the most important aspect for us, is how do we adapt, how do we live in this new normal, and how do we take the value that we've always provided and give it to our customers in a different way. And then I think lastly, it was around employee engagement. I think just mental health of our employees, having a number of them working from home, it was imperative for us to communicate. And I think we did a pretty good job previously. Our game had to be seriously upgraded though, as we entered this, because we did have a lot of people working from home, where it was possible for them to work from home. And so the only thing I would say is that, we can't communicate enough, right? And we want to certainly give them information on business status and ultimately how we're performing. But even, in a key learning for us was engaging with them socially, right? And only giving them the time to be able to socialize with their fellow employees in a totally different way than they had in the past. And so just the takeaways for us were live our values, and this isn't always easy, right? This is the time this is why you have your values, but for us it was, hey, we have to make good decisions about running our business, and we need to be financially strong. And at the same time, we have 700 plus people in Minnesota that we need to support in a real big way. And so we stepped up and took that chance, and I think that it's paying dividends for us right now. And then, I think this is the same for a number of businesses. We're better than we thought we were when it came to working from home or selling virtually or communicating virtually. That was, I would have not ever guessed that we could be as good as we had been given that. And it's total credit to our employees and to our teams to be able to do that and pull that off. And so, and then, like I touched on, just overly communicate, right? I think our employees, at least I know this, they're starving and they want information. They want to hear from the leaders in the organization to be able to tell them what's happening in the business, how we're performing, but also, give them that social interaction that they have not had, or at least was limited by the fact that they're working from home. And so with that, I'll leave it at that. I appreciate your time and look forward to any questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Greg, as well as thank you, Lee and Kevin. So we've got a few questions ready to go here, but if there are any additional questions, feel free to use the question and answer function and we'll add those in. So I'll get started, and I'll probably pick on each of you individually in the interest of time versus having you all answer every question, but so some are specific. We'll start with Kevin. So with having facilities in 2 different states, especially for a smaller business, how did you manage some of the different policies between the 2 states, or different directives from the governors or different state agencies?
Yeah, so at the very beginning, we were having daily meetings, and then we eventually went to weekly meetings, and we had the general manager of our facility in California tied into those discussions. And we did a lot of comparison with regard to what was happening in California versus Minnesota, what policies we could put in place that would cover both facilities, and then, you know, where there had to be some unique factors. So just very constant communication. We did a lot of work with regard to inventory of PPE and whether we could share between the facilities as well. So just a lot of interaction and communication.
All right. Lee, out of the 3 presenters, you've probably got the most public awareness and, you know, the most public image, I guess. Do you think that position as a very public brand put more pressure on you as far as how the general public views the actions you took in regards to the virus and, of course, the safety of your product?
Obviously, yes. You know, we've got brands that have been around for over 130 years, so we protect them, and they're intimate part of people's lives. They bring them into their homes and they feed their families with them. So yeah, we take that really seriously. But you know, it's not image first. I mean, our first call is we make food, so we have to make it safely, and we've always taken that seriously. And you know, one of our strengths as a food company and as a company in Minnesota has always been our employees. So we took that really seriously and said we have to take care of our employees first, and our broader value chain. So yes, is the answer to that one.
Greg, I'm curious, this is a question I had for the self-testing. Did you guys have put in place some kind of a safeguard to ensure that all employees couldn't skip over the testing?
Yeah, so we had to actually create, you know, different structures depending on the facility. And so we did some modifications to the entryways and changed how people enter the building. We limited the number of entrances in the building to 1 versus multiple previously. And yeah, we've had to do that, but I think, and then it was an education process, right? Just getting our employees educated on temperature testing. We did it manually at first, and now we've gravitated towards a thermal imaging unit that allows them to be able to kind of self-serve, take the test, and continue on their way. And as we're funneling that many employees through, that was imperative for us to do that, right? To be effective and efficient, and allow them to maintain social distancing while they're coming in the plants.
All right, thanks. Question back to you, Lee, on your task force. Can you just give us a general idea of the composition, the size, the roles that were on it?
Yeah, I'd say almost 20, 25 people, global in nature. So human resources, legal, comms, from the supply chain, both manufacturing as well as sourcing, because of our need to procure not just our ingredients, but in the early days in particular, PPE and other non-food materials to make our operations run safely. I was on from the government affairs perspective. Yeah, you know, it was a pretty broad cross-functional team, and as I mentioned, global. So we had people from China, France and Switzerland, Brazil, and that really gave us a really well-rounded perspective of what was happening around the globe. The last thing I'll mention on our task force, that the one capability that we didn't have was medical knowledge. We do have some medical staff, but we actually went out and very early on, back in December, contracted with an experienced medical epidemiologist who formerly worked at CDC, who has been a consultant to our task force. And that has given us a really deep knowledge of COVID, where it's heading, and the types of things we should be taking into consideration as we move forward.
All right. Just a quick follow-up to Greg's, the last question to Greg. One of our attendees asked if you had specifics on the thermal imaging unit. So I don't know if you have that handy or if that's something you could maybe provide to Twin West. But
Absolutely, I can certainly provide it to Twin West. It's a FLIR thermal imaging unit is the manufacturer, but the specifics on it, I'd have to get you the model and brand, et cetera.
We've started using a few of them at a few of our facilities across the US as well. We're kind of see it as a pilot, want to see how it goes.
Great, if you share those, we're happy to put those up for the attendees in a follow-up email.
Perfect.
Great. So back to Kevin, curious with your position as an ESOP, did you feel like that helped with morale over the last few months with employees that have a little bit more engaged role within the company?
Yeah, I would say yes, and I think again, our employees had the benefit of not having to worry about layoffs and furloughs, so it was a matter of focusing on their safety, and I think we did have some very strong rallying around, and there's definitely a strong culture here because of the ESOP. So yes.
So I'm going to ask this question. It's kind of a loaded question, so I'll leave it up to any of the three of you that want to respond. But as we speak, there's a meeting going on between business leaders and some legislators. It's been a conversation going on for a few months now, but just on liability, business liability, not only in product liability, as businesses are often taking on new products right now or ramping up production, as well as personnel, employment liability, where, we're having to make tough decisions daily. Is that something that you guys have discussed internally within your businesses and or something you've got concerns on in the coming months?
I think it's a worthwhile discussion, and I'm glad that business leaders are meeting with policymakers and having that discussion about it. I wouldn't say it's been our top concern, just because our products have been so in demand.
And I guess our standpoint from employee safety and reliability has just been, how far we can go with some of the protocols that we've implemented that would not bridge in against HIPAA or other factors there. So I think that's been the focal point. If we've broached that area at all, it's been under that heading.
I would agree with both Kevin and Lee. That's been kind of our approach, was let's employ the necessary safety precaution, whatever we can employ in our facilities to help our employees and ultimately ensure that we're being mindful of any legislation or laws that could be impacted.
All right, without opening up a can of worms, but Shannon told me I could go off script a little bit, but I'm just curious if any, when this topic came out a couple months ago, it was kind of a hot topic right away because a lot of people looked at it as, well, big business are just trying to, shirk their responsibilities, and of course, small businesses are figuring out just how to, make sure they survive. Any of the representatives, legislators on the line, if you'd like to chime in just with any thoughts. I don't know if any of you have been in any of those discussions, but curious your thoughts on what's being proposed. When you can think about it and get back on if you'd like at some point, but we'll just keep
that's the first time I've ever heard legislators be shy, so wow.
Yeah.
I think it was just because you cut out and I wasn't sure what the question was. I'm not
sorry about that. Yeah, so the what's being proposed right now is some legislation on just protecting businesses as far as them getting in trouble for producing product that may have issues in the field when they're trying to ramp up for COVID-19 PPE support, or lawsuits, maybe frivolent lawsuits against businesses for COVID-19 cases when maybe they've put in place the certain precautions that the CDC recommends, and primarily to protect businesses from things that could be detrimental even when they're trying to do the right thing. There's kind of viewpoints from both sides on whether you should be protecting the business, protecting the people. Of course, the goal is to do both, but so they're literally discussing that as we speak right now.
Right. I'm really interested in looking at the language. I mean, it would have to be very carefully balanced. As you point out, we want to protect both sides, but clearly people are rushing to address the need in good faith, and we need them to do that. So I do think that there's room to provide some margin of protection for them when they are really trying to meet need, as Kevin talked about, coming up with new face masks, coming up with new products, that really time is of the essence. But clearly protecting the public is also of vital importance to all of us. So, it depends on the language, but I'm glad that the discussions are happening. I'm looking forward to seeing language.
I would agree with that. I haven't been a part of the business liability conversations, but I have been part of conversations around liability for medical protection for medical providers. As the standard of care is evolving, very difficult for providers to be practicing in an ever-changing environment and in environments that they have never practiced in before. And some of those same issues apply to business liability as well. We've been talking about looking at limiting it to during the peacetime emergency with maybe a small period of time when it ends, and that may be appropriate in the business setting as well.
I would agree with Representative Robbins that the language of the legislation needs to be very carefully written so that it really is balanced. And one of the things we don't want a new law of this sort to produce is frivolous lawsuits, and we don't want the new law to inspire litigation. We want it to be clear, specific, and protective of all the parties.
All right, well, I'm sure some others might have some comments too, but we'll keep things moving here. So I just thought maybe we'd get some interesting dialogue going there. Maybe I'll just pick on one of you. I'll start with Lee maybe, and then if Greg or Kevin have anything to add, you can chime in. But curious if this is a question asked for one of the attendees, but do you have, or have you made recommendations or requirements for your employees for what they should be doing outside of work as far as precautions?
Yeah, definitely recommendations. We're sharing, best practice guidance broadly with all of our employees. We also share information and try and keep them apprised of their local government mandates as well, so that they're aware of it. As I mentioned, we're overall seeing better rates than the communities that we're in, and have performed better. So we feel like our employees are listening to that. We've seen some examples, of where that has not been the case in other sectors of the industry. And so I think our employees have learned from that. Frankly, because our business has been so strong through this, what we hear most from our employees is I don't want to do anything that would disrupt that. And I feel fortunate that I have a good job and with good pay, and I want to keep it going as long as possible. So we've seen strong compliance.
All right, thanks. Greg, you look.
Yeah, well, I would say that, what we published a document, and it was really based on whatever the facts that we could ascertain, and from the medical community, and ultimately published a document called "How Do We Live and Work in a COVID World," right? And so it was all about the right things to do, and how do we do that, and how do we look out for our fellow employees, and ultimately we ask that carry outside of our walls as well. And certainly can't mandate it, and that's not where we're ever going to go, but ultimately certainly encourage the right thing. And I think that to Lee's point, I think what we've seen the evidence that it's working.
Greg, do you have would you be willing to share that as well? Is that something that you could share with us?
Yeah, I could. I'm likely I can. Yeah. So I don't have it with me right now.
Yeah, check into that if possible. We've got a very active COVID page on our website, and we're getting a lot of businesses that are going there to look for some best practices, that type of thing. So I would say this to all three of you as panelists: if you've got some of those pieces that you wouldn't mind sharing, it's a great way for us to share some of the best practice insight that's happening in our community.
Perfect.
Well, I think Shannon just asked or answered one of the questions that one of the audience members had asked about a platform for sharing some of those ideas. So I think that's a great answer to that. All right. I'm going to ask one more question before we kind of do a wrap-up question. Maybe I'll pick on Kevin for this. Did you find that, especially again, having multi-state facilities, did you find that you got the answers you needed from whether it's from the federal level, the president's staff, the CDC, the Minnesota government? What did you feel was the best or have been the best resources for you as far as information and guidance?
Certainly CDC and the state health websites, though I think we all experienced that, things changed over the course of early COVID to present day COVID, masks being, one of the key factors where early on, there wasn't the recommendation to have masks, partly because of the supply issue. But we've relied on both states, state departments of health guidelines, as well as CDC. And back to the liability question, we continue to reference as recommended by those organizations so that we would have some consistency there.
Greg or Lee, you can chime in if you've got anything to add.
I'd say the same thing. It was a lot of work in the early days to get the guidance that we needed. And we were clearly an essential business, right from the get-go as a food maker. But even then, we still had to get clarification after clarification. And our employees had so many questions. But I think over time, the states and localities did a good job of getting in line and trying to find some uniformity.
Yeah, same thing here. The CDC was obviously a great resource, but also the individual states, right? So we operate in 7 or 8 different states, and ultimately we asked one person to assemble all of that information, and so that we could have a clear understanding of where states stood, any new legislation, how it may impact, the individual businesses, any mask policy, work from home, et cetera, and that we could have kind of one document that we could reference to ensure that we had the most up-to-date information.
All right, so I'm going to ask one final question. I'll just go in the order of our presentations today. But so this is a great question from the audience, and I'll ask you guys to pull out your crystal balls here. We've got economic challenges ahead. We've still got COVID challenges ahead. We've got social unrest challenges. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on around our state and, of course, the world. If you can keep it, see if you can do this. This is a challenge here. Keep it to the two words or 2 phrases at the most. So the question was, what are your 2 biggest challenges over the coming 12 months? So let's see if you can keep that to 2 phrases, without really describing it. All right, so Kevin, you can go ahead and start.
Wow.
I didn't prepare him for this question, so we'll see how they do.
Staying vigilant with the protocols and employee safety is critical, and modifying our go-to-market approach so that we can be successful in a virtual world.
Great. Lee, do you?
So 2 challenges, I'd say. The first is the unknown nature and the shifting nature of the virus. That's a big concern. There's still so much we don't know. And then the second is maintaining our high employee value and culture when we're all working from home. I mean, I think that's going to be an ongoing challenge for all of us.
All right, Greg.
Yeah, I think kind of the same things, right? I mean, ultimately, it's about how do we continue to keep our employees safe, and with the understanding, I guess, the reality that we're in this for a long time. When we started back in March, it was, let's get through this. It's a couple months. We work from home. It goes away. We're in this for a year, right? We're looking into next year to understand what do we have to do between now and then to keep our employees safe, and then under those same circumstances, how do we grow our business? Right? We have to go grow our business and continue to innovate. And I think we've had some success, but it's definitely a challenge.
All right. Well, as the moderator, my job's a lot easier when the presenters do a great job and the audience is engaged. So I want to thank everyone for their participation, and I'm going to hand it over to Shannon to do a wrap up.
Great. Well, thank you again, everybody that attended. Our members are really critical and important to us, and that insight and the feedback that we get from you is really important. To our panelists, thank you so much. The things that I heard today that will carry us through is words like vigilance, modification, innovation, uncertainty, safety, resilience, growth. all of these things are aspects that are shared by all of our different businesses, no matter what size, what industry they come from. And so we are so grateful that you have taken the time, panelists, to join us and share your best practices and your insights with us. To our elected officials, again, thank you for your leadership, and we encourage you to consider continuing to make sure that the business community is on the front and top of your mind. It's really important for us as we go forward into this economy that we're able to adjust and adapt to the needs of our business community. So there's a few things that we have coming up. July 16th, there is a great virtual event with the Minnesota Vikings. It's a great opportunity to hear from some of the players and coaches. That's on our website. We are still, although most of, I would say all of the work that we are doing with the chamber is virtual right now, we will try or attempt to get back to our first in-person event. Will be our golf outing, which is a significant fundraiser for the chamber and our organization on August 17th. And then we continue to do some virtual speed networking, connecting local businesses together. Those are the biggest things that we're doing. The chamber in and of itself took, this was a major disruptor for us as well. As you can imagine, very similar to our businesses, our revenue stream was significantly disrupted, but also just the way in which we work and operate. So we appreciate the continued support that you've given, but also just the understanding and empathy that you've shared as we also try to pivot and continue to support our members. So we wish you all the best. Be healthy, be safe. We look forward to this next, our next Issues and Insights in August is actually going to be a conversation with our healthcare system leadership around the impacts of COVID on the healthcare system. And so we know that one will be also very well attended. Again, Steve, thanks for the great moderating. It was fabulous to have you here and for the wonderful partnership. We wish you guys all the best. Have a great day.